There's been a dramatic boardroom shake-up. The Bank of Queensland has just parted company with its high-profile Chief Executive, George Frazee. Our Business Editor Ross Greenwood joins us now. Ross, I sense this is a big surprise.
I think it would be to the market a decent surprise, Laura, because he is very, very high profile. But just here's a little snippet of the statement that just a short time ago the Bank of Queensland put out. This is Patrick Allway, who is the executive chairman now. He is, in fact, basically said the board has formed a view that different leadership is now required. Patrick Allway, I should say, is currently chairman but will become the executive chairman. And the speed with which George Frazee is leaving this company basically is shown by the fact that there is no chief executive to replace him. They say they will now conduct a search. What is known is that the bank has been performing reasonably well. This is his CV, effectively, George Frazee, chief executive of the Bank of Queensland, before then the chief executive of Westpac's Consumer Bank, then the chief executive of St George Bank, and then before then the chief executive of Westpac in New Zealand. And then even when you go to the numbers of Bank of Queensland itself, this is from its recent profit report, cash profit down 5%, 508 million. The return on capital 8.4%, not great, but not bad by any stretch of the imagination. And its home loan books is $4.4 billion. But behind the scenes, there have been some issues that clearly have been there between the chairman and the chief executive for some time. One is expenses, basically, in particular, big off-campus meetings of management. And then the second thing also was the hiring of one executive, of which George Frazee was the godfather of one of that person's children, that saw a public rebuke from the chairman, who did not know about that appointment at that time. Anyway, so that's what's taken place. So a significant change at the Bank of Queensland.
Yeah, sounds like it. The big story over the weekend, as well as the government succeeding in those IR changes. Today, though, the Reserve Bank Governor is warning that real wage rises may be harder to achieve.
So this is important. Remember that it's the Reserve Bank Governor who last week wasn't necessarily critical, but did make the observation that wage rises don't necessarily just happen. You can't have a piece of legislation and then imagine that everybody is just suddenly going to get a wage rise, because if that occurs, then ultimately, as he pointed out, it will cause inflation. If it causes inflation, that'll cause higher interest rates for longer. So he's appearing before a Senate Estimates Committee right now. We picked up a little bit of his early introduction. His first response to a question was then all about wages. Have a listen.
We've got to deliver you 2.5% inflation. It'd be fantastic if we could have growth in real wages of 1-2% a year, but that's not within my control. If we're going to have growth in real wages of 1 or 2% a year, we've got to have strong productivity growth in the country. And that's one reason why I keep on talking about the need to refocus on the productivity agenda, because we can only have growth in real wages over time if we get better at doing things.
So, Laura, what you can see there is he's very much laying out that you just can't change legislation and promise that everybody's going to get a wage rise. They can get the wage rise, but there's a consequence, and that consequence could be higher interest rates for longer. What he says is Australia has got to concentrate on productivity. In other words, that we earn the wage rise simply by our output being better and greater. And that also means that government has got to be involved to improve that productivity outcome.
He couldn't be any clearer, could he? We've just got to get better at doing things. I mean, how's this going to go down? Because Labor's central promise was to lift wages. We have the RBA Governor saying that wage inflation is going to have an effect, and you can't get into that kind of spiral. So the political paradigm, I mean, I haven't seen a government work against a governor like this for quite some time. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, whether it's fair, I'm certain that they cooperate. And remember also that Philip Lowe's term ends in September next year. Now, it's broadly expected, because of the review and a range of other things happening in the Reserve Bank, that he will not remain as the governor after that time. But that being said, he's right about this issue. And this is the point. You can't legislate a wage rise because it will cause inflation. Yeah. And so the promise in many ways is hollow unless you can actually get those companies industries producing more. That would be the ambition of the Treasurer. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah.
That's what he's talked about. But the reality is it's going to happen because it's got to happen at the coalface, at the place where people are hired. In other words, inside the businesses, the small, medium and large-sized businesses in Australia that have to make that decision as to when they're going to be able to employ people and therefore, as a result, what they're going to be able to pay those people.
Yeah, well said, Ross. Very fair. Let's look at the Black Friday sales. This is not going to help inflation, is it? The city streets being full is early evidence, and the interest rate rises haven't caught up with most shoppers yet. And it's not just the streets. I mean, a lot of this is done online. It's ahead of Christmas. Our spending doesn't traditionally slow down at this time of year.
Look, Laura, I don't know if you're out in the streets of one of our major capital cities over the weekend. I was. It was chock-a-block. Now, the interesting side about this is the immediate reports coming back from the retailers this morning, and that is they're saying that they had record sales. Remember, this period of time has now overtaken Boxing Day as the key shopping period. It's actually really well timed ahead of Christmas. People get in, buy Christmas presents early, do all that sort of stuff. But it's actually the capacity of the people to pay. That's the key, because remember, we've already had these massive interest rate rises, plus increases in energy prices as well, which is all determined by the Reserve Bank to try and curb people's spending. So if people continue to spend in this way, it's going to create even more inflation. So guess what? Those interest rates are going to keep on rising. And of course, the Reserve Bank makes a decision on Tuesday next week. It's last for the year. And that, of course, is going to bring into focus what it will do at that meeting.
Okay. Interesting. Ross, great to talk to you.